Hey guys, welcome back to Zane Customs. In this week's episode, I'm finally going to be sculpting up a zombie pigman. So as you guys can probably tell by my use of the word finally, this sculpt has been in the works for a long time. I of course always wanted to do the zombie pigman. I want to eventually do all the Minecraft mobs I can, but this has been requested multiple times. And I gotta give a shout out to Muhammad Bazari. Hopefully I'm saying your name right there. This was requested quite a while ago on my Ivory Night video I put out, and of course I told him in my reply that I would do it eventually, but it did end up taking me quite a while. So long, in fact, that he decided to hit me up again with another comment telling me it's been 1 year and please make this new zombie pigman sculpt, which I don't think is actually true. I think it had only been 4 months at the time, but regardless, I realized he was right. I've been telling everybody for so long to hit me up with sculpts they'd want to see, so it's time to actually be working on those. So this sculpt, along with 99% of the sculpts I do on this channel, started off on my iPad. I have a iPad Pro with the Apple Pencil, which you guys have probably seen videos of those on Instagram or TikTok. They're really impressive, and this application is called Forger, which is obviously a 3D sculpting software, and it's not all that powerful. You'll see eventually I will transfer this model onto my computer and continue to work on it, but I really like using my iPad and Forger because I can take my iPad anywhere. I can sit on my couch and watch TV. I can kind of do anything, and I can quickly just rough out a lot of ideas. It's not as laborious as working up to my computer or anything like that. So most of my sculpts do get started in Forger, and there's actually a couple of other 3D sculpting apps on the iPad, such as Nomad Sculpt, which a lot of people have recommended to me. I haven't had the time to really get in there and learn it, but for just the quick, easy sculpts I do, or at least kind of rough drafts that I do, Forger works great. Again, once I bring it over to my computer, I'll flesh it out and make it a lot better, but Forger's nice just to start things off in. And you can see the iPad's pretty versatile as far as workflow goes. So I got my Photos app open on the right hand side, and I could open up Photos or Safari or whatever I want, and I could look up, in this case I looked up a lot of pictures of warthogs or farm pigs or anything like that, just to kind of use as reference, and of course the actual Minecraft pigman, just to stay as close as I can. But it's always nice to have reference photos as I'm sculpting or drawing or anything really, and the iPad's nice for that because you can have two separate applications open at once. And now you can see me actually looking up some reference photos of bodybuilders and zombies. And one of the reasons for the bodybuilders is because I felt like up to this point, a lot of the Minecraft work I had done on humanoid figures were pretty similar body type wise. They were always thinner and kind of skeletal, and with this one, even though they're all blocks and they're the same height as like a skeleton or something, obviously he's not a skeleton, and just kind of taking my own interpretation, I thought it'd be cool to have the zombie pigman just be look like an absolute monster, just shredded. So I ended up looking up a lot of photos of bodybuilders, and I use those as reference throughout the whole sculpting process, even when I continue over onto the computer. And another thing I wanted to work on was the posing, because I knew that I wanted this guy to just be kind of standing there. I wasn't going for an action pose because, for those of you who have played Minecraft, the zombie pigman's there. They'll attack you if you attack them, but otherwise they're kind of just doing their own thing. So I wanted this guy to look really intimidating and creepy, hence why I made him so muscular, but I didn't want it to look like he was, charging anybody, because 99% of the time, at least 99% of the time I play, they're just walking around doing their own thing. I don't really attack these guys. And like I said, I try not to go too far with these sculpts. I try to leave them as almost sketches, rough drafts, so when I carry them over to my computer I can really flesh them out. But sometimes you're just having a lot of fun and you're really liking how it's working, And at least the way my workflow's set up, I'll have time during the day that I'm working on my computer, and then the rest of the time, if I'm just watching TV with my family or anything, then I can work on my iPad. So sometimes in situations like that where I'm really having fun with, for example, the zombie pigman sculpt, I'll still continue to work on it while I'm watching TV or something, and I'll push it out a little longer before I eventually do move it over to my computer. Or if I'm working on another project on my computer, and that's my main project, then this will be my main one on the iPad or whatever it is, just whatever works for me at the time. And also you can see I started to go ahead and color this guy, which I normally don't do in Forger because it doesn't really matter. Once I move it over to the computer, I'll have to color it anyway, but I decided to throw some quick colors on there just to kind of help differentiate between the skull and the skin and let me know if I really like the way it was looking. Because, I'm trying to do my own take on the zombie pigman, but be as close as possible to the original Minecraft mob. So the Minecraft mob had a big chunk out of his face, and you can see the skull on his right side. So I decided to do the same thing, and doing these different colors kind of helps differentiate between the skin and the skull and help me know whether I like the look of it or not. But even though I did push the sculpt out onto my iPad a little bit longer than I normally do, or what might have even been smart to do, there is certain aspects of the sculpt that I just won't work on in Forger. For one, I didn't give him any legs, and that was just because I wasn't really sure how I wanted to do the legs, so I just decided to hold off until I got it on my computer. But another one being the hands. Hands are really hard to do for me. It's just so much easier to bring them over to my computer with a much more powerful program and work on them there. And you can see here, we just transitioned over to my computer and to a new program as well. So this program is obviously not for the iPad. It's a professional program for computers. It's called ZBrush, and you've probably seen ZBrush work without really knowing it, because 99% of the time if you see like a full CG character in a video game or a movie, obviously in a video game it's all CG, but in a movie or a video game, those characters start out in ZBrush, even though by the time they get onto the screen they've been changed and altered so much, but they usually start off in ZBrush. And it's just an amazing program. It's so much more powerful. You can use millions upon millions of polygons, whereas Forger you're limited on that. And the more polygons you have, that just allows you to have a lot more detail and just different things like that. You can see I'm right now able to carve out the inside of a skull to make it look more hollow, and you can add what I did for the skull there. I added a sphere on the inside, and then basically told the program to take that sphere away from the skull, so it left a sphere-sized hole inside the skull. It's kind of confusing, but you can just do a lot of cool things like that Forger doesn't really have the power or the option to do those things. And again, I know there's other programs for the iPad Pro. I've seen some things on Nomad's Sculpt, and I know that one's a lot closer to something like ZBrush, but regardless, you're not really going to be able to get something on the level of ZBrush on your iPad. It's just, I don't know if it's not powerful enough, but they just don't put programs like that on the iPad. So you do have to, or at least I do, have to eventually move over to the computer onto ZBrush to really get the sculpts to a position where I'm happy with them. And you can see I went ahead and added in some quick legs, and his left leg is mostly just a bone. It's been eaten away, but then he's got a boot on his left foot and different things like this. And these are all different meshes. So right here you can see I'm working on a hand, and I have some reference photos off to the side of what pig hosts look like, and I'm trying to kind of imitate that. But this hand, and then his leg, his left leg, his right leg, his boot, his kind of leather tunic, his chest, his arms, they're all different meshes, different models that are all in the same scene. And doing something like this in Forger is obviously possible because I ported this over from Forger, and they all started off as different meshes, but that's one reason why I didn't end up adding in legs in Forger, and boots and the hands and all this stuff, is just because when you start to have so many different items in your scene, Forger just can't handle it. And of course I can go a lot lower on the quality of each item, but then that kind of defeats the purpose of working in Forger as long as I did, because I did end up pushing this sculpt out, like I said, a little bit longer in Forger, so I'm able to add more detail and flesh things out more. But if I had went ahead and added in all the legs and all these different things, I wouldn't have been able to do that. So in Forger, you're really limited. You kind of have to pick and choose what you want to focus all your processing power on. Whereas in ZBrush, you do run into that issue if you have a lot of different meshes in a scene, and every single one of them is millions upon millions of polygons. But 99% of the time, you don't have that issue. You don't need to have that high of a polygon count for most things. Most video game characters are 30,000 polygons. And whereas I am working on sculptures and I want to print these up on a 3D printer, I tend to work at a higher polygon count, because you print them, you want all that detail, whereas video game characters, a lot of that detail ends up coming out in just textures and paints and stuff like that. They don't video game characters, you can't actually model in all of their wrinkles and pores on their skin, because the video game software just can't handle that bit. And something like this, where I'm going to be printing it, if I do want to have all that pore detail, it has to actually be in there. It can't just be texture paints, because obviously a 3D printer isn't going to do anything with textures. And I guess I should kind of talk about what like polygons and textures are real quick, just in case anybody's confused. So in Forger or ZBrush, in really computer graphics in general, or 3D computer graphics, I should say, everything is made out of basic shapes. So with this zombie Pigman, if you get down deep enough, if you zoom in far enough, you can see that he's actually just made out of millions of little triangles that are all, sculpted and bended in certain ways that it looks like it's a real thing. And you can kind of see that here and there when I am working on, if I add in a new shape or something, it always starts off as a sphere or a cube that just gets modified. But when you go down deep, they're all mostly little triangles or little squares that makes up this whole mesh. And that is also why if you're working on something and you're kind of pushing it too hard, you can start to see some weird geometry, like the skin starts to warp in weird areas, or you have a really big flat area on one side of his arm or something like that. It's because you just have, say you have one triangle there and you're just trying to stretch it. That triangle is getting bigger, and you can't bend the triangle. They only bend, the mesh only bends where the triangles meet. So kind of confusing, but basically your whole mesh is just made out of triangles. And then the textures would be after you go ahead and paint the character. You can export some texture files, so it's basically gets all the detail of like I mentioned, pores or wrinkles in the skin or any small details like that. You can sculpt that in and then paint it, and then you could export it as textures, so that it's a lot easier for your computer or your video game system to handle it, because at that point it's just an image that has all that the wrinkle information on there, but it's not actually on the mesh. So that's kind of a little bit confusing, but this quick rundown on those two. And the reason I'm kind of focusing on those and talking about those a lot is because I'm actually going to be using a third program in this video, and I'll talk about that later when I export the sculpt over to that program. But that, just needless to say, that program, you have to really worry a lot about the polygon count and textures and different things like that. So kind of working on the sculpt and trying to port it over to this new program taught me a lot. It wasn't quite successful with this project, but going forward I learned a lot, and hopefully my future projects I'll be able to port over to this third program and do some really cool stuff with it. But to get back to this, to the main sculpt here, really one thing I try to do as much as possible, which almost has never happened, is work out the whole sculpt as far as like laying out the arms and legs and the position of everything. Just get everything laid out, and then move on to details such as wrinkles and, really fine details like that, and then move on to coloring. And I used to do that in the past a little bit better, save coloring for the end, but at this point I kind of just bounce around from, you could tell there's certain parts of his body that aren't done yet as far as texturing, like adding in the wrinkles and the skin textures and things like that. But I'm also going ahead and painting already, so I think a lot of times it turns out better if you can just kind of focus on one category at a time, really like lay out the body shape and add in all the main details, then go ahead and add in fine details like wrinkles and pores and things like that, and then eventually go ahead and color it. I think that's kind of a better approach. But with this one, the Muhammad Bazari had been waiting long enough, so I was really just trying to bust this sculpt out. And I just kind of jumping all over the place. And, it keeps things interesting. It keeps me more interested in it if I'm kind of getting bogged down on, say his hand is giving me trouble, I'll bounce around on something else and then come back to that the next day, or, whatever you got to do. And a lot of times I don't love the way my coloring process goes, because for the longest time I always thought, well, I'm going to print this out so it'll be a physical statue and then I'll paint it then. So, painting it in the computer, it isn't really that important, but it really is, because for one, if I were to print this, or if I was trying to print this and sell it, it gives me a good reference to go off of to kind of see what I want it to look like. And also just for YouTube thumbnails, or if I'm posting pictures on Instagram or anything, a sculpt looks a whole lot better if it's colored up, painted, rather than just gray, And even though you have the lighting and all this stuff, so it can look pretty cool gray, it always ends up looking better colored. And I'm always trying to push my sculpts to be better than the previous one. For a while, I was just trying to get out one YouTube video a week, and that didn't really work out. It did for a while. I got those videos out, but I wasn't really happy with the sculpts. I just was done with them because I had to be. So now I'm really trying to take as much time as I need until I'm happy with the sculpt before I go ahead and make the video and move on. And definitely getting better at sculpting and painting in general is going to make me a lot happier with these sculpts. And one cool thing I decided to do with the sculpt was add a little bit more to the whole diorama. Most of the sculpts, they're just the character standing there, and I'll have a little base that's inspired by a certain biome in Minecraft or something like that. But this one I decided to go ahead and add in a nether portal, and of course a little bit of netherrack that they're standing on. But I think adding in this nether portal made it look so much better. It added a whole lot to the sculpt. I don't know, I just really liked it. It's something I don't know if I'll do every time, just because if I do ever decide to go back to Etsy and start selling these things, then that's a big chunk of resin that I gotta print up. But I really like it. I think it's cool. And now we're transferring over to the third and final program, and some of you might have guessed it, it is Blender. Again, Blender's pretty popular. It's free to use. It's really cool. And you've probably seen some videos on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube even of people using Blender. And basically what I wanted to do with it is import my model here and just kind of color them up, texture them up in Blender, and get some really high quality photos out of it. So at the end of the video, I'll show you the comparisons between a photo that ZBrush can render and what Blender can render. And Blender can just do so much more. Blender has something called ray tracing renderers, which basically means if you have a light source, the computer can calculate, all these different rays, all these different light rays that bounce around the scene, and can calculate it and render out a really high quality photo so it looks as realistic as possible. Whereas ZBrush can't really do that. And also you can see already, this is the same exact model, but it just kind of looks more realistic. It's moving really slowly here. I left this in just to kind of show you because it cannot handle the amount of polygons that I put into this character. And again, that's why I was talking about polygons and texture painting and all these different things, because this is stuff I'm going to have to learn if I want to bring a character over into Blender. Blender just has so many powerful tools that you can use to make some really cool things. You can see here I got this nice glowing effect on the nether portal, the skin, the leather tunic, everything like that. You can add different modifiers too, so the skin actually has a little bit of transparency through on it, and the skin, or sorry, the light can kind of seep into the skin. So if you ever shine a flashlight on your hands and you can see it kind of looks reddish, that's called subsurface scattering. It's the light going in and scattering into your skin, because your skin's actually not see-through, but it's somewhat transparent. And that's something you can actually do in Blender, and it just brings your model, your piece looks so much better. It looks way more realistic. And again, the nether portal, you can add glow effects and all these different really cool things that ZBrush just doesn't allow you to do. And I mean, it makes sense. ZBrush's whole goal is for sculpting, and it's the best program for sculpting, even though, like I said earlier, Blender does have a lot of different applications or different things you can do in it. You can do some 3D sculpting, but ZBrush is the best at sculpting. But it just unfortunately doesn't have really impressive renderers like Blender does. So that's why I'm starting to branch out. I'm messing with Blender right now. There's another one called Unreal Engine, and that's actually a video game engine. A lot of you might have heard about it. You can do some amazing things in there. They're using it for movies. The Mandalorian TV show uses Unreal Engine for a lot of its effects, and with that one, it's all real time. So I theoretically should be able to leave my characters at a really high polygon count, and it wouldn't be an issue because of the way Unreal Engine works. But we'll see. I'm kind of messing around with those, but definitely using these cool renderers to get really high quality photos is something I'm really looking forward to. So here we go. This is the final renders now. This is ZBrush, just straight up ZBrush. They do have some sort of lighting settings, so this is just basic lighting, a simple render head on. It looks cool and all. There's a few other things I could have done. I could have potentially made the purple part of the portal transparent, but there's nothing really behind them, so it wouldn't really have added much. And this is fine. This is what I did for probably 90% of my videos, or more. This is what I did for a long time because this is all I knew. This is also ZBrush. This is just exporting a bunch of different layers of like an ambient inclusion, a light layer, all these different things, and then adding them together in a program like Photoshop and using different blending layers to help highlight some of the different details. This one I didn't do an amazing job on. I just kind of threw it together really quick, but this is a lot better. You can get a lot more impressive renders doing something like this, but again, you're still kind of limited on what you can actually do. You can tell right off the bat that these images from Blender just look so much better. Again, with the ray tracing rendering going on and all the subsurface scattering and the different materials you can add, like the reflective material on the golden sword and just different things like that, it makes this model look so much better, and I'm really happy with it. Got one here of the nether portal with a nice glow going on. Unfortunately, like I said, I wasn't able to do too much with it, but it turned out pretty cool, and I'm really happy with it. It's definitely something you guys will see me use in the future, whether it be Unreal Engine or Blender or whatever it may be. It's definitely something I'm going to be using a lot more. And before you guys go, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. Anybody that made it all the way to the end, I know this was a pretty long one, but it does mean a lot to me. Anybody willing to like, comment, subscribe, anything like that, it helps me out a lot, and I super appreciate it. And one last shout out to Mohammed Bazari. Thanks so much for the suggestion. It was such a fun sculpt. And if you guys want to see anything in the future, any sculpts, any drawings, anything really, just comment down below. I'll definitely get to it eventually. It might take me a while, but I'll definitely get to it. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.